Hi, it's Wynn, and welcome to another educational video by the Entropy System. This last week marked a huge milestone in our life, in that we are no longer regularly in therapy. We got to the point where with our current therapist that even when we dropped down to once every other week, we really didn't have any big untangleable knots that we would bring to therapy sessions. For the most part, we were solving our problems on our own. And so we, along with our therapist, decided that I probably didn't need to come in on a regular basis anymore. It's been a long 6-year journey of hopping around from one therapist to the other, trying to figure out what was wrong with me and why it was taking so long for me to get better. So since we seem to have come to the end of this path, I'd like to share my therapy journey with you all. It started in 2012. I was in the military and I was finding it very, very difficult to recover from a recent adult trauma that I had experienced. The PTSD symptoms were unbearable, and so finally I talked to one of my sergeants and asked him if I could see a counselor on post once a week. He connected me to her, and she was a civilian counselor. She didn't have any kind of trauma specialization or anything like that, but she was very nice and she listened to me and she was validating. One of her main practices was art therapy, and that was really great for me, actually. Unfortunately, my symptoms didn't become more manageable, and I ended up being hospitalized in a psych ward for 6 days that October after one of my sergeants interrupted a suicide attempt. I don't know what other people's experience with inpatient is, but mine was absolutely terrible. It was awful in every way, and I think that a large part of that has to do with how terribly the military in general handles mental health. While there, the nurses on duty treated me like trash, didn't take anything that I said seriously. The only good thing that I had was Andrew coming to visit me every night, so that was the thing I could look forward to. But I felt like I wasn't a human. When I finally got out of there, the doctor who was in charge signed some paperwork so that I would be able to get out of the military on a medical discharge. And because I was going to get out on a medical discharge, especially because it was a mental health medical discharge, my officers in my unit absolutely hated me, treated me like trash. They stopped saluting me. When you encounter an officer in the Army, you're supposed to salute and hold that salute until they salute you back. But my officers, I would salute and they would walk, and I would have to wait until they were a certain amount of paces away before I could drop my salute. And this happened every single time. My captain also didn't want to give me a certificate that you are required to give any soldier who leaves your unit for any reason other than dishonorable discharge. This is a brigade level requirement, but my captain disliked me so much because of my mental health issues that he refused to write one, and my first sergeant ended up having to write one on his behalf. So getting out of the Army was really good for me. But I still had these symptoms. I still had this PTSD that was haunting me, and I didn't know how to handle it. So as soon as I moved back home, I started looking for a therapist again. I first sought out a psychologist, and that was awful. Not saying that all psychologists are awful, but I started appointments with this woman, and I had 3 appointments, and she has still not asked me one question or allowed me to speak about my story. She just talked about her healing methods for 3 appointments until I finally got up and said, "I'm sorry, this isn't working out," and left. Then I was able to find a counselor. She wasn't like a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist, but she was a counselor who specialized in trauma, and so I went to go see her, and I started seeing her twice a week. Working with her helped for a little bit. Some of her methods, she was very new to this field, and she started me with EMDR. For those of you who don't know, EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. It's a form of physical stimulation where you stimulate first the left side of the body, then the right side of the body, and then back and forth. It helps both sides of the brain connect and allow you to first experience memories and emotions to a much higher degree so that you can then rework your thoughts around those memories into more positive, in a more positive direction. And that didn't work for me in that situation. And I now know that there are two reasons why it didn't work for me. One is that EMDR works a lot differently for many dissociative individuals than for non-dissociative individuals. And all the resources that I've read, including talking to my current therapist, says that, it should be generally approached in a different way, just because the minds are set up differently. Also, because she was so new to EMDR, she didn't really know what she was supposed to do with it. And so I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it. We would sit there and I would hold these tappers that were buzzing in each hand, and she would say, okay, focus on this trauma memory. And I would relive it in great, great detail. And then she would say, so how do you feel? I would say, terrible. She goes, okay, think about the memory again. And so I would, and then we would just repeat like that. And I was like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Like, this is just leaving me in pieces, and I don't feel like it's helping me at all, but I guess I'll trust you. And then after one session of EMDR, the next day, I went to school, and there was this truck driving up, and it was driving up a little fast, and it hit the brakes and it stopped a very safe distance away from me. But it must have scared another one of my parts very badly, because even though I was upstairs in the classroom taking calculus, all I could think about was being on the street bleeding out. And for some reason, I thought I was down on the street, even though I was sitting in the classroom, and it was like this weird out of body moment. My other parts were hypersensitive because of the previous day's EMDR session, and nobody knew that I was dissociative at all, and it just kind of exploded in my face. And so we stopped doing that. But after we stopped doing that, the sessions had very little direction, and we ended up I would just sit there for an hour and chat about life, and there really wasn't any guidance or anything like that at all. And I felt very frustrated. I was like, I want to get better so badly. I found a group for childhood trauma survivors. And I knew I had experienced some level of childhood trauma, but it all seemed very minor to me. But still, because it was a group of trauma survivors, I wanted to go because I was trying to overcome my trauma, and I thought that this group would be a great fit for me. And it was in that group that I met my current therapist, because she was the one who ran it. And she was a very just wise and compassionate individual. She had great insight. She was patient with all of us and able to kind of guide us down positive thought paths to help us process the stuff we were talking about. And being in that group was a really positive experience for me. So positive, in fact, that one day I stayed behind and I went to the leader of this group and I asked her if I could perhaps start seeing her as my therapist instead of the counselor I was seeing at the time. After a series of questioning, she agreed, and I started seeing her instead. And she was just as kind and wonderful as she had been in the group, but she kept asking me about my childhood. And I thought that was a weird stereotype, that you see on TV of, tell me about your childhood. Because I told her everything I could remember about bad stuff that happened in my childhood, but I was like, listen, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because of an adult trauma that happened to me. Can we please focus on that? And she goes, we'll get there. But let's talk about your childhood first, because she saw something that I either couldn't or refused to see. Was seeing her for a few months, and I still didn't feel like I was getting better. I still would have these episodes that I couldn't explain. I would have nightmares, and I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning because my body would be locked up, which I now know is Karen taking over the body and being very, very scared and not allowing me to get out of bed. All I knew was that I would wake up in the morning and I couldn't talk, and I couldn't move no matter how hard I tried. And I was missing school on a regular basis. I felt like I wasn't getting better. After years, I wasn't getting better, and I wanted to know maybe that if there was something else that was wrong with me. So I decided to go and get like a full mental evaluation from a psychologist. I took tests for, I think like ADD and autism and borderline personality disorder and a couple others, just a bunch of booklets. You fill out a bunch of bubbles and it comes back with results. And then, before all that, the psychologist interviewed me to make sure what I was saying was matching up to what the bubbles were saying and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, nothing spectacular showed up, just the same diagnoses of anxiety, depression, PTSD that I'd already had. I was like, okay, then why am I not getting better? I was so frustrated, and I was telling this to my therapist, and she goes, did the psychologist test you for dissociative disorders? I was like, well, I don't know. There were a lot of booklets, maybe. She's like, I want to give you a test. So she gave me something called the MID, which is a diagnostic tool that therapists can use to help them determine if they have dissociative clients and like to what degree that they're dissociative. So I took this test and the results came back, and it compares your results to the average results of different patients, like with no dissociation, with PTSD, with DID, and a couple others. And my line was way higher than any of the other ones, except for DID. It was a little bit lower than DID, but much, much higher than the others. And I was shocked by this. And it said on the bottom of the paper, possible diagnosis, dissociative identity disorder. I was like, what? That totally threw me, because that wasn't something that I had ever considered as something that could happen to me, because I wasn't aware that anything that I experienced could have been because of DID. So after that, my therapist started to work with me under the scope of having a dissociative disorder. And things started to change after that. My alters started showing themselves to me. I started being able to connect with them, and I wasn't sure what they were at first. I just knew that there were changes that were far more dynamic than anything that I had been aware of before. I met Mistletoe first, and then Daniel, and then Michelle, and it just sort of started to build from there. We had good communication basically right away. It wasn't perfect, but we could communicate, we could talk, I could see them, I knew their name, I could hear a faint voice, like I could assign voices to them, and my therapist was a little surprised. She was like, wow, you're moving very quickly with your system. She was like, I'm not really surprised that this is happening to you, because you were so ready to just jump head first and do whatever work you had to do to get better, because that's the type of person I am, is like the solve the problem right now type of person. And so when I wasn't getting better and I wasn't getting better, I was like, diagnose me with anything. Tell me what I have, and I'll figure out how to make that work, because I've tried everything and nothing's working. I'm not getting better. So as soon as I thought I might have DID, I jumped in and I was like, okay, let's connect. Let's talk. Let me draw a picture of you. Tell me what you look like. And I know that on their end, they opened up doors of communication with me, because they kind of collectively decided that, okay, she's in a place now where we feel safe coming out to her and making her aware of us. So hard work from both sides. We had good communication basically right off the bat. The more of my parts I was introduced to, the more we connected, the more we learned about each other, the more memories that we processed, and oh my God, the trauma memories were awful and really just threw me through a loop, because suddenly I couldn't trust anything that I thought I had known ever, and I couldn't trust anyone who I had known ever, because I didn't know what was real and what was still hidden, and it was very difficult to process. But the more processing we did as a system, the more so much made sense, and the more I started to be able to navigate life in a more functional way. Slowly but surely, I started missing less and less class. My grades improved a bit. I still wasn't, an A+ student, but I wasn't failing classes anymore. I would have fewer anxiety attacks. And when I did have anxiety attacks, I was able to coordinate with Daniel and then later Kit to kind of come forward and take over for me, so we could still move forward and function through the day, even if I personally could not. And just for the first time, I was like, oh my God, I'm improving. I'm getting better. This is amazing. And so, you know, it took about a year and a half longer, maybe 2 years, about 2 years of therapy after being aware that I was a multiple for me to get to where I am right now. And even then, 2 years on the grand scheme of things seems very small, but we've done so much hard work in that meantime. And my therapist was really happy for me. She was like, wow, you are more confident and put together and forward moving now than any time I'd ever known you before. Like, I feel like you've grown so much. And I was like, yeah, I feel like I have too. Our sessions slowly started to decrease in their intensity, and it got to the point where I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about every week. So then we started seeing each other every 2 weeks, and even then, I didn't have much to share when I got into therapy. So, you know, my therapist said, you know, I don't want to tell you to stop coming, but I don't know if you have a reason to come anymore. And I was like, okay, well, we've been through a long road of crap. So let's make sure that this isn't just like a temporary good place, and let's keep seeing each other for a little bit, just to make sure this sticks. And so I kept going for 2.5 more months, and I only once every 2 weeks, and I still didn't have anything to talk about during therapy. And so today, I was like, yesterday, I decided that would be my last regular session with her. And, you know, she was really happy for me. And she said that if I ever felt like I needed to come back, that her door was always open. But, you know, she was proud of how far I'd gone and thought that I was going to be okay. And, you know, I honestly do too. You know, for the first time ever, I think, I feel like a very self-sufficient, competent human being. Like, I feel like an adult who could take care of herself. And, you know, it's a really nice feeling. It's very nice, from going to being a child to going to the military and being treated like a child and then overcoming trauma, and then finally for the first time feeling human, you know. And I have my system to thank for that. You know, it's hard work on all of our parts. And of course, I have my amazing therapist who helped me through, and I have my amazing husband who helps me through every single day. But I feel, you know, like I finally gotten to a really great spot in my life. And I wanted to share that journey with you all, just to encourage you that no matter how low you feel or how hopeless it seems or how much it feels like you've plateaued, that doesn't mean you're going to feel that way forever. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I want to offer a big thank you to Menagerie and all of our other patrons who help support this channel. If you're interested in becoming a supporter, our link to our Patreon is in the description below. And if you're interested in sending us fan mail of any kind, the address to our P.O. box is also in the description below. I hope you guys have a really great day. Bye!